I checked my P.O. box like a month too late, December 10th, 2025. Letty, I saw these earrings and thought about you. I had to get them for you. I love watching you. Love, Jessica. Jessica, I'm so sorry. Look at how cute these are. Wait, it's not too late. It's not too late. It's Christmas still. Wait, just hold on. Oh my god, I can't believe it's still December. Look at the cute earrings Jessica got me. If you don't play along with my shenanigans, you're fake as fuck. You better watch out. Ooh, you better not cry. It's still Christmas. Okay, but this outfit would have slayed.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So I'm trying to stay on theme because, you know, it's Christmas. And what do kids get on Christmas? They get toys. Except for in my channel, they get haunted toys. So this girl says that when she was little, she woke up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. And she saw her Barbies, 2 Barbies to be exact, pulling this little bag where she kept all of their outfits in. Now, she says that when the Barbies realized that she was watching them, they just threw themselves on the ground like Andy's coming type of situation. She immediately screams bloody murder. Her parents come and she tells them exactly what she saw, and she says that thankfully her parents gave the dolls to someone else. What? Ma'am, why didn't they burn them? Why didn't they bury them? Why didn't they take them to like the trash? Who did you give them to? What the fuck? So this next girl says that when she was younger, her godparents gave her this doll that would sit on like almost a rocking chair and would sing. Now for some reason, this doll would start rocking and singing on her own in the middle of the night, but she tried to ignore it because it did freak her out. Because her fear was getting the better of her, she decided to take the batteries completely out of that rocking doll. That same night, she was awoken with what she felt like a lot of pressure on her stomach. When she opens her eyes, she has that doll sitting on top of her. Please tell me you burned her. Gave it back to your godparents? Maybe you moved away from the country? That's how the story ended. This guy claims that his mom had this porcelain doll that would make fun of him and his siblings, including make angry faces at them. Dolly Dearest who? So there was one night where the lights went out in that house and the mom was gonna go and get some fuses. Is it fuse? Fuses? Fuse? The mom was gonna go get something. So when the mom said she was gonna leave to go get, you know, the light fixed, he started crying because he didn't want to be left alone in the room with her porcelain doll. The mom was so over it at that point, so she decided to get the porcelain doll, put it on her dresser, and face her away from them, so she was facing the wall. You know, she thought that maybe if they weren't looking at the doll's face that the kids wouldn't be scared. When the mom fixed the light, comes back into the room, he is crying like crazy, and she's asking him what's wrong, and all he does is points towards the dresser. He says that that fucking doll was sitting down at the edge of that dresser facing him. The mom's face was complete shock, and she definitely believed him after that. They waited for the dad to come home, and he says that the dad put it inside a plastic bag and gave it away. What the fuck is wrong with y'all? Now, the story doesn't end here, but it could have. It could have ended here if they had just gotten rid of that doll the right way. So years later, the boy, who is now a man and a dad, is walking through the flea market, and they're going through these used toys. The stand that they're looking at these toys that belonged to this older lady, and when she saw that he had a daughter, she went right up to them and said, "Hey, I have this doll. My daughter is scared of it. Do you want it for your daughter?" He, traumatized from the past, tells her, "No, thank you. I think we're good." The lady insisted, and she says, "Well, how about we show the doll to your daughter, and if she likes it, then I'll give it to you for free." He was honestly just trying not to be rude to that lady, but he really didn't want a doll to take home, but he let her show it to his daughter. When this lady pulls out this doll out of a sack, he says that the doll started laughing on its own, and the daughter, being as little as she was, tells this older lady, "Oh no, thank you, ma'am. I don't want that doll." He says that his daughter literally squeezed his hand and told him, like, "Let's walk away from here. We don't want any toys from this stand." They walked for a little bit in silence, and that's when his daughter looks at him and says, "Did you notice how ugly and evil that doll was laughing?" He says it was the same fucking doll that would scare him so much when he was a kid. This is your second chance to burn that fucking doll. You still let it be out there. Anyway, what do you guys think? Also, Jessica, thanks again for the earrings, and I really hope you guys say Merry Christmas to each other in the comments, because you know it's Christmas. New Year's is to come.
So I've heard of haunted dolls, but a haunted mirror? I am back with another spooky story. We're gonna call the person who submitted the story Menna. Menna said, "I didn't think anything of the mirror when I bought it. She found it at a small flea market that pops up once a month in her city. When Menna saw this mirror, she said, 'This is cute.' It was the exact vibe that she had been looking for her place. And the man selling it said it came from an estate cleanout. There was no story behind it, no drama. It was this tall, narrow mirror. It had wooden frames, and it had a little crack running from one corner to the other. But it looked artistic. It almost looked like the crack belonged there. It looked very antique-esque. She knew that the mirror itself was very expensive, but she was getting it for a really good deal. So the first night she brought it home, she had the perfect little nook to put it in. And that night, she had a dream. And in her dream, she was standing in her room exactly as it was. Same clothes on the chair, same details. However, the only thing that was different was the mirror. The mirror wasn't in that little nook that she had put it. It was slightly off. When she looked into the mirror, her reflection looked delayed. It wasn't like she was distorted or anything. It was just like her reflection just came a little bit slower. Then as she's staring into the mirror, something steps into the reflection behind her. Says she woke up right after that, heart racing, has no idea what that dream even means. She told herself that it was just a stress dream. Well, the dreams continued every night after that. Always the same room and always the same mirror. Sometimes in the dream, she would look into the mirror and she wouldn't see anything at all. Other dreams, she would look in the mirrors and she would see figures standing behind her. That one thing is, she never saw a face clearly, but she knew it was a male every time. She said what made it worse is how real everything felt. She would wake up tired like she'd been awake all night. She would wake up somehow just staring at the mirror. She said that she noticed that the mirror was the problem about 2 weeks in. She said one morning she covered the mirror with a towel before work, just out of unease. And the mirror itself decided to have an ominous feeling around it. I mean, it's been showing up in her dreams for the past 2 weeks. She said when she covered up the mirror that night, she said she slept better than she has since bringing it home. No dream, no waking up panic. Nothing. The following day, she had guests coming over. She didn't want to come off weird, so she uncovered the mirror. She forgot to recover the mirrors that night. She went to sleep and nothing happened. And for a whole week straight, nothing happened. So at this point, Mena's feeling like, okay, maybe it was just all a coincidence. Maybe it was the newness of the object that was taunting her. Here she was thinking that the mirror was haunted. The whole time, it's probably just her brain playing tricks on her. Well, about a week later, the dreams came back stronger. But this time, the figure spoke. Not in a language that she understood, but she said she understood the intent. It wasn't an inviting presence. It was a claiming presence, okay? Oh, after that, the presence didn't only stay confined to dreams. Somehow, it found its way in real life. She would wake up at the same time every night, between 3 and 3:30 a.m., feeling watched. The air always felt heavy, like the room was occupied. Once, she felt the bed dip, like someone had just sat down on the bed, even though she was awake. And there was nobody next to her. Finally, that was enough, she told her aunt, who immediately then asked her about new objects in her home. And that's when she mentioned the mirror to her aunt. And her aunt went quiet. Y'all, her aunt told her that some jinns attach themselves to reflective surfaces, especially ones with cracks, places that are already broken. That night, Mena did not sleep. She wrapped the mirror in a sheet and took it out of her apartment before sunrise. She didn't even bring it into the trash room. She left it outside, near the flea market where she had found it. She walked away without looking back. She got her some holy water, did a prayer, sprinkled some holy water all over her home in the entrance of her home. She also entered her home facing backwards. She said that the dream stopped immediately. She never experienced anything like that again. She said do not ever buy secondhand mirrors or ones with cracks on them. Wow, that was spooky. Thank you so much for submitting your spooky story. If you have a spooky story that you want me to tell, feel free to DM it to me right here on TikTok or over on Instagram. If you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel for longer, better, and spookier stories, I don't know what you're doing. I literally have mermaid stories that I refuse to drop on this platform over on my YouTube page. My YouTube name is Rebecca's Journey, just as spelled on this platform. Alright, like I said at the end of every video, I love you, my abducted humans, from your absolute favorite Haitian homegirl.
I don't know. If this would have happened to me, it definitely would have freaked me out. So this guy said that for a few weeks, he made an observation while out driving. He said he noticed that when people were at crosswalks, when they would get the green light to go, as they would walk across, they would pull their phones out and just sort of look at their phones while they were walking. He said it wasn't anything special. It was just one of those mundane observations that he was making. So he says on this particular day, he was out driving with his daughter. He said they pulled up to a red light and he noticed that there was a man standing at the crosswalk waiting to cross. He said nothing out of the ordinary. The guy looked like he was about 6 foot, denim jacket, black baseball cap, glasses. So as he's sitting there, he thinks, I'm going to play a little prank on my daughter. She's really gullible. She's 5 years old. This is going to blow her mind. So he goes, see that man over there? When the walking man turns green, he's going to start walking across. He's going to reach into his pocket and pull out his cell phone and start looking at it, figuring there's a pretty high probability of this actually happening. Okay, and here's where it gets really creepy. So he starts walking across and he does put his hand down in his pocket, but then he immediately pulls it out, points right at the guy in the car with this big gaping mouth smile, almost like, got ya. And of course, his daughter thinks this is absolutely hilarious, but he's kind of scared. He's mind blown. He said that he must have sat there with a dead blank stare for probably 10 seconds watching this guy cross. And then as he drove away, he kept checking in his rearview mirror, and the guy was just laughing to himself, shaking his head. He said he's been playing this in his head over and over again. The windows were all up. The radio was on. They had to be almost 20 feet away from the guy at the crosswalk, and he said he was not very loud. There is no way that this guy could have heard what he said. He said it would have been impossible. The only remote possibility could have been maybe that the guy crossing the crosswalk kind of noticed the same thing about people, and then maybe was thinking that the driver was thinking the same thing and then just took a chance at a joke. But I mean, like, how unlikely is that? I don't know, guys. That was a fun little weird one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
You want to hear some scary shit? Well, let's go back to New Orleans. This story was submitted by another one of our paranormal baddies. She is an RN and she was at a nursing conference. And of course, after the conferences, we want to explore the city. Now, this wasn't a very touristy time of year, so it wasn't like the quarter was full at this time. So she stumbles upon a bar and she notices it's really inviting. The wind is blowing a little bit, swaying the sign. It's a little bit of fog out there, but it's inviting. She walks in and assesses the situation. She notices that there is a lot of Victorian era decor. Even the patrons are dressed in Victorian style clothing as if there was a theme party. In the corner, there is a piano being played, but the music is hypnotic but eerie. She sits down at the bar and orders her a drink, and she meets this lovely lady. Let's call her Genevieve. The first thing she says that she notices about Genevieve are her impossible green eyes, piercing, and her red garnet lipstick. Genevieve suggests that she gets another type of drink, and she orders it for the nurse. So the nurse states that the drink was kind of thick, but it wasn't too sweet. Perfect. They're talking, exchanging, little casualties, nothing really too deep. But she notices that the room gets a little blurry. Not anything to alarm her. She's just thinking, woof, this drink is a little strong. And then she pays attention to the piano again, because now it's like the music is moving her and she's being hypnotized. Little Miss Genevieve here touches her and asks her, "Are you okay?" She notices that Genevieve's skin is a little cold and notices that it's also very pale. Now our nurse says the next thing she remembers is waking up in her hotel room, fully clothed, but her feet were still wet from the cobblestone, her shoes. She goes into the mirror to wash her face, and she notices there's a red dot here. She said not a bite mark, but a red dot. The next day, she's walking around asking locals about this bar, and they're like, "I don't know what you're talking about," or they're, kind of turning pale themselves, and "No, I don't know what you're saying." Until she runs into a bartender who's an older gentleman, and he says, he heard of a place like that, but it burnt down in the 1800s. And, there were all kinds of vampires and sorts of things, and they would invite tourists in, and the tourists would never leave the same. The nurse is like, absolutely not. This is not possible. But she goes back to the same spot, and all there was old bricks and overgrown ivy. There seems to be a going trend in New Orleans of buildings being there and then disappearing. The RN now lives in England and states that when the fog rolls in, it's almost as if she can hear the piano playing again, and she still dreams about Genevieve to this day. So when you're in New Orleans, keep your head on a swivel. And, how are you going to know till it happens, right? Some scary shit.
Let's read another true and scary story. This one is called A True, Very Creepy Surveillance Story. So first of all, I only just discovered this subreddit today, which reminded me of something that happened to me in 2008. This was a huge thing to my friends and family, and I didn't really talk about it back then as it scared the fuck out of me, but it was a while ago and is a really well-known creepy story among myself and my friends and family. But I think I may as well share it, and it is admittedly terrifying. I was living with my parents and sister in Brisbane, Australia at the time, 2008, which means I was 19. I remember my dad had just gotten Foxtel, cable TV in Australia, but only the TV in the lounge room could use the cable box, and I really wanted to somehow get the cable in my room without paying $99 or whatever for a new box. So Dad went out one day and bought an AV transmitter/receiver. It was basically a two-piece bit of hardware where you would plug this tiny box into the cable TV in the lounge room, and it would transmit a video signal to the receiver connected to the TV in my room. So one Saturday, I decided to connect it. This is a picture I took of the setup when I was telling a friend the story. My younger sister, 16 at the time, was the only other person home at the time, upstairs in her room. My room was downstairs. I opened the box and connected it up. At first, I was going back and forth trying to get the cables right, trying to get the channel right, etc., but no luck. Until I finally got something. I remember just sitting there and something started fuzzing in. This is where things start to feel like a horror movie. I remember thinking, oh, here we go, and waiting to see the picture come in clearly. As it started fuzzing in, I remember that this whole time the cable set top box wasn't even on, and that's why it wasn't working this whole time. But then why was I getting a signal? It seemed to all hit me at once. As I realized the box was off, the picture fuzzed in and I saw a bed. Here's the first picture I took. I freaked the fuck out as at first I thought it was my own bed. I had recently seen Saw 2 and remembered that scene where she turns on the TV and it's a camera filming her in her own apartment. That was the first thing I thought of. I sprinted upstairs to my sister, absolutely terrified. I told her to come down and take a look. She came down and we both realized it wasn't my bed. We didn't know whose bed it was or how I was getting the signal. Obviously, it was the AV receiver picking up a camera signal, but we were just so confused as to who/what it was for. Eventually, my parents came home, and we concluded that it would have to be a neighbor or someone living close by for us to be receiving the signal. We waited around until about 6 p.m., and then someone came into the room. My dad recognized it as one of our neighbors. We still didn't know what the camera was for, but we assumed it had to do something with fidelity. Either his wife or he had set it up to watch the other and see if they were cheating. We entertained the idea that he was a murderer and would film himself murdering people in his room, but just to freak each other out. We'd always make jokes about how one night we'll turn it on and it'll just be his face with clown makeup on, staring at the camera, waving, and then him walking out of the bedroom with a knife. This never happened, but what did happen was still super creepy. We connected to the signal for over a week, but after a few days the novelty kind of wore off. We felt a bit weird watching it, which as you should, and just resigned to the explanation that it was to catch his wife cheating. Until one day we turned it on and realized what we had discovered. Our neighbors were having a bunch of renovations done to their house. During weekdays they'd be out and there would be workers at the place pretty much all day. It had been like this for over a month. We started watching the feed and saw a man walk into their room. It was the plumber that had been there regularly for the renovations. We didn't think anything of it until he started opening drawers. I called out to my mom, the only person home at the time, and we started watching it. He started getting the wife's underpants and sniffing them and doing all of this creepy shit. At first we were like, oh my god, how embarrassing, he's being filmed. Will the neighbors see this somehow? But then what happened next was truly terrifying. He slowly walked over to the camera and looked right into the lens. We were convinced that he knew we were watching. Mom immediately called Dad. I kept watching. He started fiddling with it and then he put it back down. I told Mom that I don't think he knew we were watching, but he's definitely the guy that put the camera there. Dad came home and by this time the plumber had left. Much to my mom's pleading, Dad went over to the neighbors to tell them what we saw. Mom wanted to stay completely out of it and was terrified, understandably. When we told the neighbors, they had no idea what we were talking about. They allowed Dad to go up to their room, and what he found that was holding the camera was an installed device in the wall that was designed to monitor water usage, which was completely normal at the time, as Brisbane had been hit with a drought recently, and there were lots of water restrictions, still is now, I think. The plumber had installed this into the wall, but had fitted a camera behind it in the wall to watch the bed. Immediately, they called the police, who came over and conducted an investigation. For the next week or so, we didn't hear much about it. I spent most of this time just telling my friends, showing them pictures, but truthfully, my whole family was scared every night. It was just creepy thinking that we could have had stuff like that hidden in our house. Chances are we didn't, but it was still really scary. After a couple weeks, my mom was speaking to the wife next door and asked what happened with it all. The wife said that the police found out he would, at nights, come to our street and sit in his car, which had really tinted windows, and watch them on his laptop. When Mom told me this, I got the biggest shivers. The reason was, besides the obvious of a creepy dude sitting in his car watching people through a hidden camera, was because on multiple nights when I had driven home late from my girlfriends or walked home drunk after a night out, I remember seeing a station wagon, always about 30 meters down the street from our house. It was never there during the day, always at night. I'd always walk past it and look at my reflection in the windows, assuming no one was inside. I was always so confused by whose car it was, but literally never thought it was anything. It still scares me so much that it was just this creepy fucking plumber sitting back in there on a laptop, watching a hidden camera stream of my neighbors. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to share, please make sure to email them and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
What's up, Mama?
What's up, son?
All right, you was just telling me a story about how you seen a goat man or something like that.
I don't know what it was, but I know it was might have been back in early 70s, but probably maybe 1970. But my little niece at the time, she might have been like 8 or 9, and we had a Rottweiler dog named Duke, and she had went to the laundromat to get us some candy and stuff. So when she was coming back, we heard her screaming from the top of her voice. I mean, loud. She was just hollering so loud, and the dog was barking and growling. And so we all ran outside. My mama, my dad, and my other siblings. We all ran outside. And so we see this big old thing. It stood like 6 feet, maybe taller than that. But I know it was 6 feet something. And it had like horns. Like these big old horns going in the back of his head.
What?
And he had the hoof feet. It stood up like a man. But it looked like a goat.
What? What color was it?
It was like brown, grayish, dark, like dirty gray.
Yeah.
Like a goat would look. And
What it looked like? Like what?
It looked like a goat. And it had them pink eyes, them big old pink eyes. And then so when my niece was screaming and hollering, the dog was barking real loud. I guess when the thing saw us, it jumped up because my mom had a tree on the side of the house, and it jumped up in that tree, and you could see sparks flying from off his feet, and then it jumped on top of the house, and we all were looking at it, and it was gone. We don't know where the thing went.
What?
We looked all around the house. We looked just all down the alleyway, and it was gone. I don't know what it was.
Oh,
I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it went.
So,
All I know.
So your niece was coming from the laundromat, and she started screaming. Y'all came out, and when y'all came out, that's when it because you seen it too. Y'all seen it too, and it jumped into a tree.
Jumped up on it. My mama had, we had a big tree on the side of our house, side the window. And that thing jumped up in that tree, and you can see them sparks. And then it jumped on top of the house.
And it had big pink eyes.
Pink eyes, them big old horns.
Did it make a sound?
It made like a gargling sound. I don't know what it was. It's like, just
yeah.
just deep.
And it looked like a goat.
It looked like a goat.
Like the body was a goat.
But a goat, you can see a goat, be on all fours, but this thing was standing straight up like a man.
What?
You can see the goat legs and the hoofs, and it just leaped up in that tree, and sparks was coming from them hoofs, and then it jumped on top of the top of our house, and it was gone.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. True paranormal experience. Well, maybe that's what we're here for. One time in the summer of 2020, me and a few buddies went to this place in our hometown known for being haunted called the Gaines Tavern in Walton, Kentucky. This is honestly totally something that I would do. There's actually a prison here where I live that does like haunted ghost tours, and I want to do it so bad. I want to do it so bad. If I could guarantee that whatever was there wasn't going to follow me home, I would have already done it. The TV show Ghost Hunters actually did an episode on it. Season 14, episode 6. I'm gonna have to go check it out now. It was 10 to 11 p.m., pitch blackout besides a couple of dim lights in the parking lot in front of the house. We went to just mess around and maybe catch some orbs on camera because we all love paranormal unexplained stuff like that. After about 30 minutes of walking around the property and looking in windows with our flashlights, we started to leave, and I decided to take a photo of the very front of the building to maybe catch some orbs. For context, it's a big manor with the front having 2 rows of like 10 windows top and bottom, with a door right in the middle. If you caught a face, if you caught a body, if you caught a ghost, we're gonna have a problem here. Also, I need to see the evidence. In the very far left bottom window, you can make out multiple figures. Right. It's a ghost meeting. They're getting together, having a chat. Here's the thing with catching like photographic evidence. I absolutely hate seeing it, but I also love seeing it. And it was actually a day where it had snowed, which is crazy because it never snows back home. It happens like once every 100 years, okay? It had snowed, and it was me, my sister, I think my brother, and my dad, and we were standing outside of the house, and my mom snapped a picture of us in the snow, and there is a person in one of the windows looking out at us. It's like a full face. I need to ask my mom to see if she can find it. I hate it, but I also love it because at that moment, I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew there was something in the house. There's also another picture that I took of my cousin and I when I lived with her. We were laying in her bed, and in the background, there is a face. And I remember taking 2 consecutive pictures. I took one and then I took the other one. And in the first picture, we didn't move or anything. It was just 2 pictures back to back. In the first picture, there was nothing in the background, and then in the second one that I took right after that, there is a face like right in between our heads, and I need to find that one as well. It's a really old picture, I mean over 10 years, so I need to see if I can find that one, because I remember we saw it and we were like, wait, what the fuck is that? You can make out multiple figures, one of which is clearly a bald man in a wife beater and overalls. You didn't see this until zoomed in. At first, it's just a white blotch to us, but you could clearly see it. I didn't move and had my friend stand in the exact same spot I did and take the picture of the exact same angle and everything, and it looked completely black, just like every other window. We took a few more and could not replicate the first photo. After realizing the photos were actually different and that I got something on camera, we booked it out of there. Love when somebody recognizes that something is very creepy and they get the hell out. Driving back to my friend's house is when I zoomed in and you can see the silhouette of the man. I swear you can make out his belt buckle too. Oh, so it was a good picture. That same night, my grandma died. What? My mom called while I was back at my friend's house and told me around midnight. She'd been battling spine cancer, and I knew she wasn't doing great, but the timing was wild given what just happened earlier that night. Around 3 a.m., my best friend sat up from the couch and just started clicking his tongue and talking about his back and that he needed a new back, but it was barely coherent and he would not respond to me and my other friends that were awake. And we were full volume asking him what he was talking about. What the hell? Then, like it never happened, he passed right back out. Oh no. I mean, I know people sleep talk, but this is too huge of a coincidence. A few minutes later, I woke him up asking what he was talking about. He started saying the same thing about his back, then all of a sudden stops and says, I honestly have no idea what I'm even trying to tell you. After we woke up and told him what he was doing, he was adamant that he had no recollection of what we were talking about. The sleep talking thing is all fine and dandy, but this hit too close to home. I do not like it.
You guys, how Melissa, who I changed her name for privacy reasons, said that she decided to buy willingly a haunted doll on eBay. For contributing to the channel, for real. This is something. Being a non-believer and believing that as long as she didn't believe in evil or believe that there were evil spirits, that nothing can really touch her. She do? She looked on eBay for the most haunted doll she could find and purchased it, and within 2 weeks the doll was at her door. She decided to put the doll in her room on top of a shelf facing her. Melissa says that she was out to prove a point that, you know, if you don't believe in it, nothing can happen. It's all in your mind. This is all mental, and that people just make up stories so that other people can get a thrill out of it, which I can see that happening. However, why would you do that? Nothing happened the first 2 days. However, on the third day, she realized that her house keys were not next to the front door. They were on the counter in the kitchen, which she assumed it was just her and that she had forgotten that she left them there, which she usually doesn't, but she said it was probably that's what happened the third day. On the fourth night, she says that not only was her keys moved to the counter again, but the cup of water that normally sits on the side of her bed when she drinks it in the middle of the night wasn't there. It was in the bathroom, emptied. Also dismisses it and thinks maybe I went to the bathroom last night and I don't remember using the bathroom and I don't remember drinking the cup of water, but I must have left it there myself because there's nobody else. I don't live with anybody else. And then she says on the fifth night, not only was her keys moved, her cup moved, the doll was laying next to her when she woke up. I would have freaked out. But okay, let's continue. She dismisses it. Maybe she got up in the middle of the night and she moved her house keys, moved her cup, put the doll next to her for some odd reason. And yeah, that's what she thought it was. And this, she said, happened for like a week. And then she decided, you know what? Let me put the doll back into place. Let me not grab a cup of water. Let me not move my house keys. Let me leave them on the counter. Let me not bring a cup of water into bed. Let me leave the doll on the shelf and let me go to sleep. She says that the next day she woke up, her keys were next to the door. The cup of water was next to her dresser full. And then the doll was back in the bed with her. The no judgment zone, I'll tell you this right now. This is a side note. I would have freaked out. I would have freaked out. Like, wait, what? Like, what? At that point in time, I was like, yo, I have to be getting up in the middle of the night putting this doll next to me. Like, there's no possible way this doll is doing all this. This is crazy. So Melissa was like, you know what? Let me not bring a cup of water to bed. Let me leave the keys on top of the counter. Let me let the doll sleep with me. And maybe, you know, just maybe things will stop. Okay. Melissa says that finally she had it. She woke up one day in the middle of the night, full force sleep paralysis. She couldn't move. All she could move was her eyes. She felt like something was sitting on her, literally sitting on her chest. She could barely breathe. She said that she looked around the room as much as she could from where she was laying. And she said it was pitch black. All she could see was a little bit of light from the window, casting against the wall. And it just so happens that where the light was cast, she could see a figure of a woman just staring at her, just staring at her with red eyes, just staring at her with red eyes. Then she says that the woman started walking towards her and she felt her heart in her throat. She couldn't breathe because, of course, she felt like something was sitting on her chest. And the closer and closer the woman got to her, the woman looked just like her. Just like her. Next following words that came out of that thing's mouth or that entity or whatever that was, do you believe now? And it just got in her face. She said that she will never forget the smell of rotten eggs when that thing got in her face. That she blacked out of fear. Like, she was so scared that she blacked out. And the next morning she grabbed the doll and burned it. She just burned it. And she said never again did anything happen in her house. And she's a firm believer now. She just says, don't mess with things that you don't know. And it doesn't matter if you believe or not believe. Don't think you're untouchable. I think that was. And yeah, I wouldn't try that at home. No.
Have you heard the story about the Green Children of Woolpit? During the 12th century, 2 children allegedly turned up in the village of Woolpit, a small village in Suffolk in England. Both children had green skin, but that wasn't the strangest part. These children were unable to communicate because they didn't speak English. They spoke some unknown language. In fact, the locals claimed it sounded like gibberish, but they seemed to understand each other. These children rejected all food that was offered to them. The only thing that they would eat was raw beans. Now, the young boy actually passed away, so they tried to integrate the little girl into the community, into the village. The older she grew, the green pigment started to fade. but she did learn how to speak English and was eventually able to communicate and tell people where they came from. She claimed that they were from a land with no sunlight. She said it was a place called St. Martin's, but she has no idea how they ended up in Woolpit. They then actually baptised this girl. She went on to get married and have children and ended up living a normal life. The story still remains a mystery. Some people believe that these children were maybe aliens or even fairies. Who knows? But it's fun.
Let's read some more scary stories that were sent to us. This happened when I was living in a different state and I was about 12 to 13 years old. It was that time of year between spring and summer where you do nothing in school. My friend Ella and I had the bright idea of taking our dogs on a walk. Where I lived, we had a bike path that went on for miles, and that's where we'd go to walk and ride our bikes. I met up with Ella and we began walking and talking. About 5 minutes into our walk, a white van with tinted windows passed us. The windows were almost black. I didn't think much of it because crime didn't happen often in the town I lived in. A couple minutes passed by and Ella stops. I was confused on why she stopped and was about to ask her when she cuts me off and said, "Something isn't right. I have a bad feeling." Ella wasn't afraid of anything and laughed at horror movies. But when the van circled us a third time, our blood ran cold and we began running. We didn't stop until we got to her house. I'm 18 now and wonder what could have happened if we didn't run. That story is so scary because that is real life. That is something that could happen to anybody at any time, and I'm so glad that they listened to their instincts and they got the hell out of there. I was around 7 or 8 when this happened. I used to like staying up late at night after everyone went to sleep. I'd hide under my blanket and peek out into the dark, just watching the shadows. It was kind of a habit for me back then. One night, though, something felt different. My whole family was already asleep, and I did the same thing as usual, covered myself with my blanket and peeked out. But this time, what I saw completely terrified me. In the darkness, I saw a figure that looked demonic. Red, burned-looking, tall and heavy. I froze in fear. After a moment, it disappeared back into the darkness. After that night, everything changed. I became scared to stay up late, and I started praying every night before sleeping, and I quit my habit completely. But I've never forgotten what I saw. And that is why I don't be looking out into any darkness. I grew up watching horror movies with my family, although they didn't believe in the supernatural. We live in a quiet and kind of small village. Everyone knows everyone, and even I, who's socially awkward, know who everyone is. I would often take walks or strolls with my bicycle, so I knew when people took out the trash, went outside, etc. It was late one night, maybe around 10 or 11 p.m., and we were coming home from a family vacation. When we were about 5 houses down from our house, we saw a tall old man taking out the trash out of nowhere, and we accidentally hit him. We immediately got out of the car, but there was no one there. We were confused and tired at that time, but we swore we saw a tall man. Plus, our van literally felt like we hit something. We brushed it off, plus we had a camera installed so we could see if we actually hit someone. When we got home, we went and checked on the camera immediately. We didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that, but when we checked the camera, there was no one there. There were 4 of us who saw the man, but the camera didn't show anyone. It even filmed the van shaking like it got hit and us checking outside. The good news is, y'all didn't hit anybody. Poor ghost was just trying to take out his trash.
One night around 2 a.m, I was watching Netflix and reading a book. The rest of my house was asleep. The thing is, my TV, if you don't touch the remote after a certain amount of time, turns off. And I wasn't paying attention because I was reading and I was unaware of the timer slowly ticking down. When my TV turned off and all I was left with was an eerie silence. There was no background noise, my brother's usual music wasn't playing. I remember feeling really on edge as I sat there and I went to turn the TV back on. But as I reached for the remote, something stopped me in my tracks. It was quiet at first, like a low crying kind of noise, and then suddenly it got really loud, like a wailing noise followed by sniffling, and it sounded like it was coming down the stairs. As I was only young, I ran straight to my door and slammed it shut and then hid away under the covers until it stopped. I remember it went on for at least 3 hours. The next day I told my parents and they didn't believe me, so I just let it go. However, a couple of weeks later, once I'd forgotten all about it, I was lying awake around midnight or 1 o'clock when I started to hear the crying again. The thing is, I really need a wee, and I wasn't about to piss myself even if a demon was going to kill me, so I headed to the toilet. Now, the way that my bathroom is set up, we normally leave the bathroom door halfway open so that light spills onto the landing so we're not consumed by darkness. You have a mirror in front of you as you walk in, then to the right of the mirror is a window. However, right opposite the window is a mirror, which at night time, when you first walk into the bathroom, you can see the mirror and the reflection of the window. Anyway, now you know the layout of my bathroom, we can continue. As I'm heading in, I take a quick glance in the mirror in front of me and then the window, but as I'm looking at the reflection, I notice a face at the bottom of the corner, peeking through.
Oh, not peeking again.
It had a large smile plastered across its face, and it had long, greasy black hair. I thought to myself, I'm not dying like in a horror movie, so instead of investigating like those idiots, I slammed the bathroom door shut, ran straight to my parents' room, and woke them up.
Good girl.
They never believed me, and I just forgot about it after that. But still to this day, I hear the crying, see the face, and sometimes he whispers, peekaboo. That's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. I love you guys so much. Sarah!
Put a finger down. Would you survive a skinwalker encounter? If you put more than 5 fingers down, then you would not survive. Put a finger down if you live in the middle of nowhere. I just know there's a skinwalker waiting for you. Put a finger down if your backyard is surrounded by woods. Oh, so just where they like to be. Put a finger down if you like going on night jogs or walks. I hope you're careful of your surroundings. Put a finger down if your street doesn't have any streetlights. Wait, so it's just pitch black outside? Put a finger down if your neighbors are nowhere near your house. So it's really just you, your house, and the woods. Oh! Put a finger down if the first person that pops up when you click share then more doesn't live anywhere near you. Now how are they gonna save you if you encounter a skinwalker? Put a finger down if your parents work night shifts so you're usually home alone. I just know you keep every single light on. Put a finger down if your pet is always barking at something that isn't there. No, because animals sense things that we can't. Put a finger down if you've ever seen something strange in the woods near your house. That just might be a skinwalker. Lastly, put a finger down if you noticed outside is oddly quiet at night. I hope you know that means that there's something or someone around your house. Go ahead and comment how many fingers you put down and if you would survive a skinwalker encounter. And if you made it this far into the video, comment a red heart so I know you're a real one!
Today we're just going to do a really quick haunted house story because I found it really interesting. This house was located in Bothell, Washington. In 2012, Keith Louder decided to rent it along with his girlfriend, Tina. Now, I can't find any other pictures of this house except for the one that was on the article, so this is what we're working with. Keith was a software engineer and he was very excited to live anywhere near Seattle. He was also really excited that they had found this house so cheap, but their dreams would very quickly come true when strange things started happening around the house. Shortly after moving in, things would start moving on their own or just disappearing, and at first they thought that maybe this was just them misplacing things or whatever, but soon it got a little bit more intense. One night while the couple was watching TV, they watched a vase levitate on its own, and it just kind of hovered there before coming crashing to the ground. It was then that they knew that something was wrong and they should probably get it checked out by paranormal investigators. Both Keith and Tina decided it was in their best interest to call a local priest, have them come check out the house. Now, it was very quickly found that this place was in fact haunted by something. So they decided to reach out to the previous tenant. She said that she would never come back. The previous tenant said that she would never come back to the house because of all the paranormal activity she had experienced there. Her exact words to Keith and Tina were, "That house is a living hell." They decided to call more people to come check out the paranormal activity, see if anything could be done. It seems like nothing could be done. So Keith and Tina decided very quickly that they needed to move, and that's exactly what they did. New tenants would take up residence in this house, and they confirmed that paranormal activity was still happening to this day. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that houses are really haunted? Is it something more sinister, or is it all just a hoax? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and follow for more spooky things.
July of 2017, Jerome Kennedy was laying in bed next to his wife, and his 10-month-old daughter was sleeping in her crib in the corner of their bedroom. And as he's laying there, he starts to hear what sounds like scuffling sounds above his ceiling. Now, above his ceiling was an attic. It was more like a crawl space because it was incredibly tight, and Jerome and his family didn't keep anything up there. They didn't spend any time up there, in fact. And so Jerome's laying here thinking, man, did an animal get up there? I mean, this is a pretty old apartment building. It's certainly possible that a squirrel or something could have crawled inside the attic, and that's what's making the sound. But eventually that night, the sound stopped and Jerome went to sleep. The next day, Jerome went up into the crawl space and there was nothing up there. But it's a pretty big space, and again, it's pretty difficult to maneuver around. So he thought, it is still possible that there could be an animal up here, but there wasn't any immediately obvious signs, and so he went back down and just hoped it would stop. A couple days go by and he hasn't heard anything in the attic, and then one night he wakes up to the sounds in the attic. And when he opens his eyes, there's a vent that sits at the top of the wall right in front of him that's actually over his daughter's crib, and he could have sworn he saw what looked like a flashlight coming from the attic. Immediately, he gets up and walks over and pulls the vent cover out, and he's looking into the attic, but it's not a good view. It's a curved vent, so at best, you're getting a little sliver of a view into the crawl space, and he didn't see any more light, and he didn't hear anything else, and so once again, he kind of chalks it up, puts the vent cover back in place, gets back in bed, and falls asleep. The next morning, he tells his wife about the light he saw in the vent, and now they had already spoken about the strange sounds coming from the attic, and she knew that perhaps there was some animal up there, but the light definitely caught her off guard. But then she remembered that next door, they were doing a whole bunch of renovations on the apartment, and perhaps the partition, there was a break in it, and they could be doing some late night work, and light could have leaked through the break in their partition wall in the attic, and maybe that was causing the flash of light. So Jerome knocks on his neighbor's door, and he says, hey, I saw a weird light in my attic, and I'm trying to see if there's a break in our partition wall that perhaps if you guys were working late last night, light could have poured through onto our side. Is that a possibility? And his neighbor said, we were not working late last night, and I've actually been up into our attic, and I've checked that partition wall because we're doing renovations, and I need to make sure this apartment is in good working order because I'm looking to sell it, and that partition wall is solid, so I don't think there's a break in it. Jerome and his wife are totally stumped, and so they decide, let's just put a security camera up in the attic and let's see what's moving around up there. Let's see what's causing the light and these sounds. So that day, Jerome goes out, he gets a little security camera, he comes home, he installs it in his attic, and then he, his wife, and his daughter go to bed. That night, Jerome doesn't wake up to any sounds in the ceiling, he doesn't see any lights, and so when he goes to check the footage the next morning, he's not expecting to see anything, but he is shocked at what he discovers. In the middle of the night, after Jerome, his wife, and his young daughter have already fallen asleep, you see on camera as the partition that separates Jerome's attic from his neighbor's attic slides open, and in crawls who else but Jerome's neighbor, Robert Havrilla, the same guy he was speaking to the day earlier about, hey, have you heard anything in the attic? Well, turned out it was his neighbor. So he comes in, he's carrying a drill and a plank of wood, and he crawls very quietly over Jerome's side of the apartment, and then he pulls aside some insulation that clearly he had already detached before because it slid out of the way very easily. He lays the plank down over some beams, and he gets himself positioned over it, and then he uses his drill to drill a hole right into Jerome's ceiling, and it would happen to be directly above his daughter's crib. He'd put the drill back, and then he'd lay there on the plank of wood and stare through the hole at Jerome's daughter for 30 minutes without flinching. After he was satisfied, he got up, pulled the plank out of the way, he slid the insulation back in place, he grabbed his grill and the plank of wood, and he crawled his way back into his side and shut the false door. Jerome calls police, who come over and they look at the footage and they immediately arrest his neighbor. But then when they go up into the attic to look for themselves, they find there's all these different drill holes that have been carefully covered over because their neighbor had been doing this for some time and had developed a sort of awful routine where he would come in and spy on the family, specifically their infant daughter. Jerome's neighbor was found guilty of criminal trespassing and was given 5 years of probation and had to pay Jerome's family $2,245. Here is the very creepy security footage of Jerome's neighbor. Growing up, Colton Louder was a joy to be around. He was always goofing off and making people smile, and he had a really infectious laugh. But secretly, he was depressed and began self-medicating at a very young age. By the time he was 18, he was a full-fledged drug addict, and by the time he was 25, he was in jail on a life sentence for murdering his uncle over a drug-related dispute. Colton's actions had a profound impact on his family, but none more so than on his twin sister, Kaylin. She had known about his pain even when he was putting on that facade of being happy and bubbly and outgoing, and she had reached out to him and tried to help him, but she could never get through to him, and when he was ultimately convicted, it was crushing to her. She felt like she couldn't help someone who was really vulnerable. But instead of just feeling bad about this, she took her sadness about her brother and watching him spiral and turned that into a laser focus on helping other vulnerable people that were struggling with addiction and depression to try to help them before they end up like her brother. And eventually she would get her degree in social work from Utah State. But despite Kaylin's best intentions to want to help as many people as she could, she found it very difficult to find work in her field, and it wasn't uncommon for her to have fairly long stretches of unemployment. And it was during one of those long stretches in 2014 that Kaylin's life rapidly fell apart, and it left everybody who knew her thinking, what just happened? On September 26, 2014, a little after 9 p.m., Kaylin calls 911. She reported that there was this huge, brutal fight taking place in her condo's clubhouse. Basically, it was like a restaurant where you could rent it out in the first floor of this condo complex. And she said it was getting out of hand and police needed to come over here and stop it before someone got hurt. The police asked her if weapons were involved. Were people using weapons in this fight? And Kaylin says yes. Guns. But when police rush to the scene, bracing for the worst, they discover that it's just a docile wedding reception happening inside of this clubhouse, and not one person in there reported any altercation happening. They were like, we're being pretty quiet. I don't know where she would have got that from. One guest would tell police that they had lit off a single firecracker, but they showed them what they had used, and they were these little tiny cheap things that made almost no noise. So it is possible that Kaylin could have mistaken that for a gunshot, but it does seem highly unlikely. Police leave, and then 1 hour later, Kaylin calls 911 again, but she immediately hangs up as soon as an operator has actually answered the phone. And the operator calls the number back, and Kaylin picks the phone up, but she's not really speaking. She's mumbling, she sounds confused, and the operator said, hey, you tried to call 911 a minute ago. Is everything okay? Can you tell me where you are? And Kaylin would have a really hard time giving her address to the police. It was like she couldn't remember her address. And she's mumbling, and at some point she says, my roommate thinks I'm delusional and paranoid, but I'm not. Kaylin eventually kind of calmed down and said she was sorry for calling 911, and the operator said okay, and they hung up, and that was the end of the call. The next morning, Kaylin calls 911 for a third time in 24 hours. This time, she's frantic. While she's on the phone with the operator, she's periodically screaming at these two people that are apparently robbing her apartment to get the F out of here, get out of my apartment, you can't be here. And the operator is trying to get more information out of Kaylin, but Kaylin is very distressed. She can barely communicate with the operator. She's half crying, and the operator tells her, can you leave? Can you go somewhere safe? And Kaylin says, no, there's only one way out. This is a small apartment. I can't go past them. And the operator tells them that police are on their way. Just stay in your bedroom. Don't go anywhere. And so while Kaylin is huddled in her bedroom and the dispatcher is still on the line listening, you hear Kaylin's roommate, Carol, walk into her bedroom and very calmly say, Kaylin, what's going on? And Kaylin's like, Carol, get over here. You'll lock the door. Get in here. There's two people in here. They're robbing us. They're out there. They're in the other room. And Carol's like, no. There's no one here. The front door's locked. Kaylin suddenly sounds really confused, and she says, well, I can't explain that, but they must have been in here because I heard them. They must have had a key, and that's how they got in, and that's how they got out. And right at that moment, the responding officers show up, and there was no sign of a break-in. Nothing had been taken. It really looked like nothing had happened unless someone really did have a key. At this point, Kaylin was very embarrassed. She apologized to the officers. She apologized to her roommate, and she ended up calling her mom and saying, I'm mortified. I can't believe I just called 911 3 different times and nothing came of any of these calls. Like, I feel so embarrassed about it. And her mom, being a good mom, told her, you know what, don't worry about it. No one got hurt in the process, so it's all good. And so Kaylin moves past it, and on the call with her mom, she starts talking about what she's going to do that day. She says, well, I'm looking to update my resume and submit it to a couple different job openings, and I also want to clean up my apartment. And so they hang up the phone and everything seems normal again. But at about 5:45 p.m. that night, Kaylin, along with her beloved little dog named Phyllis that apparently she took everywhere with her, were seen exiting the condo and walking out to the parking lot behind their building. Kaylin was barefoot, was only wearing a tank top and shorts, despite the fact that it was cold and raining. And as soon as she puts her dog down, because she was holding her dog in her arm, Kaylin begins having this totally animated discussion, except there's no one there for her to be talking to. About 15 minutes later, she and her dog turn around and walk back towards the condo complex out of view of a camera, but residents would say they saw her crying and going up to a gate that lets you back into the condo, and she apparently couldn't open it, and as she's standing there struggling, she suddenly stops, puts her dog down, turns, and starts running away. And the camera footage we have of her is only when she's back in the parking lot, but she's running away still, and the dog is nowhere to be found. Her beloved dog, she's abandoned, she's got no phone, no wallet, and nobody knows where she's going. Later that night, when Kaylin's family could not get in touch with her, because of all the weirdness around those 911 calls, her family just had a bad feeling about it, and so they filed an official missing person report that night. When police arrived at the condo complex, the first thing they did is they reviewed the security footage, and they already knew about her 3 911 calls that had happened within 24 hours, and all of them had been for unfounded reasons. And they see Kaylin on camera, barefoot in a tank top and shorts in the rain, and she's having this animated discussion with nobody before running around and running away. And so police go to Kaylin's family and they say, does your daughter have a drug problem? Is she mentally ill? And her family tells the police, no, she's got no history of mental illness. She definitely does not have a drug addiction because of what happened to her brother. And they explain what happened with Colton and how that had a tremendous impact on her, and how that had actually sent her on a course to help people with mental illness or people who are fighting against addiction or depression. And they explained how she was just really well adjusted and everything seemed okay until these 911 calls started, and now this. So this huge search is launched between the police and volunteers, and actually the Louder family even hired some private investigators to help them look for Kaylin, but days turned into weeks and there was no leads, no one knew where she was. She had just vanished. Then on December 1st, 10 weeks after she went missing, city workers were inspecting drainage pipes down near the Jordan River, which was a river that went by her apartment, and they discovered behind some plants a body that was half submerged, and it would turn out to be Kaylin's. They pull her out of the water and no cause of death could be accurately determined because of how long she had been in the water for. It looked like she had been in there for probably all of the 10 weeks she had been missing. They were able to determine that there were no drugs in her system and there was no water in her lungs, which meant she didn't drown. Her body was found 5 miles from where her apartment was, and so initial speculation was she must have gotten hurt and fallen into this river and drifted the 5 miles downstream to where she was found. But they looked at that section of the river between her apartment and where she was found, and the water was simply too shallow and windy, and it would not have been possible for a human body to travel that distance. Which means almost immediately after she ran off screen on the security footage, she covered those 5 miles, wound up at that section of the Jordan River, died and then fell in the water, or fell in the water and then died, but not via drowning. The police officially ruled Kaylin's death an accident, but her family disagrees. They say if you look really closely at the security footage right before she runs away, it looks like she's terrified. More specifically, it looks like she's terrified of someone we can't see on camera. When she's having that animated discussion where it looks like she's talking to no one, further feeding the idea that she had kind of lost it, well, there's this huge rock to the right in the video that kind of obscures our view, and behind that is this huge forest. And it is theoretically possible that someone could be back there that we can't see. But no matter what, her family believes that whatever she was doing in her final moments on camera is the key to understanding why she ran off and ultimately died. So you be the judge. Was this a psychotic break, or is there something more?
I've never experienced anything paranormal before, but I wanted to send you this story. My cousins and I went to Mexico City to visit our family. Our parents weren't able to come with us, so we traveled alone. When we arrived, our uncle picked us up and took us to his house. Everything was going fine, and we were having a good time. That night, 3 of my cousins and I shared a room. We were sitting on the floor playing Uno when, out of nowhere, a strong gust of air blew our cards out of the stack. We all thought it was strange, especially because no doors or windows were open. Still, we shrugged it off and eventually went to bed. I felt uneasy, but managed to fall asleep for a few hours, until I was suddenly awakened by an unrecognizable voice coming from upstairs. All of us heard it. We went to tell our uncles, but they had said they hadn't heard anything. Since the voice came from upstairs, we decided to investigate. Upstairs led to the roof. As we climbed the stairs, we noticed large footprints made of dirt. When we reached the roof, my oldest cousin, who was 17 at the time, suddenly went quiet. She had a shocked expression on her face and wouldn't respond to us. We tried talking to her, but she just stared into the darkness. Worried, we led her back inside. That's when we noticed she was extremely pale and cold to the touch. I immediately called my grandmother, who is a curandera. As my grandma performed her cleansing, my cousin suddenly vomited black liquid. Afterward, my cousin told us that the moment we stepped onto the roof, she felt as if something else had taken control of her body. She couldn't speak or move on her own. My grandma then told us the truth about the house. The house had been built on the burial site of a family. Years ago, a father lived there with his wife and their 2-year-old twin daughters. According to the story, the father went insane one day and took the lives of his wife and young daughters while they were on the roof hanging laundry. Afterward, he took his own life. After what happened to my cousin, a priest was brought in to bless both the house and my cousin. The very next day, we left the house.
The oldest unsolved cold cases in American history is the disappearance of Dorothy Arnold. She was a wealthy New York socialite whose family had ties to the Mayflower. Went missing in December of 1910 after buying chocolates and a comedy book and cutting through Central Park to get home, and there's a few theories on what actually happened to her. We'll get to those theories, but there's a little bit of an interesting backstory that I think you should hear first. Her dad was Francis Arnold. He's the one with family ties to the Mayflower, and his sister at one point was married to a Supreme Court justice, so like a lot of important people in his family. Her mom was from a wealthy Canadian family, and then she had 3 siblings, John, Dan, and then she had a little sister named Marjorie. Marjorie was 18 and she was about to have this like coming out party of like, I'm a woman now, or whatever they did back then. Basically, she was ready to get married. Meanwhile, Dorothy is 25 and still unmarried. She was trying to be a writer. That was apparently a big deal back then. Like if you're 25 and unmarried, you're basically a spinstress. She had gone to college and graduated in 1905, and she was more interested in arts and literature. She also had a little sneaky link boyfriend named George S. Griscom, and he was 42. He was an unemployed engineer who still lived with his parents. He was from a wealthy family too, and they had presumably met at Bryn Mawr University, where she went and graduated from. She lived in Pittsburgh, but apparently her family didn't approve of their romance. I don't know if it was because his family wasn't wealthy enough or because he was unemployed as an engineer. We don't really know what happened. So they were corresponding in secret. Their affair was going on for like 5 years, and maybe that's one of the reasons she didn't want to marry anyone else. But in September of 1910, so just like 2 months before she goes missing, she lies to her family. She's like, I'm going to go spend some time with one of my friends in Cambridge, somebody from college, and her family's like, cool. She was actually going to spend a week with George in Boston, and in order to fund this trip, she pawned $500 of her own jewelry. It was a gold watch, a chain, 2 diamond rings, and 2 bracelets, which she reportedly received $60 for. And keep in mind, this is $500 worth of jewelry back then. Apparently, she meets up with George. Everything's going good. She registers the hotel in her own name, and they're going about in public as if they're engaged. They're telling people they're engaged. She has a great time. She goes back to New York. She tells her family she wants to move into her own flat in Greenwich Village. Apparently, she said this would help her inspiration as a writer, and she was writing and getting rejected from a bunch of different publications at this time. She thought moving to Greenwich Village, which at the time was a hub for creatives and writers, would help her, I guess, get the creative juices flowing. But her dad was like, absolutely not, you're staying here. And he did give her $100 a week allowance during that time, but he thought that a good writer could write anywhere and there was no need for her to move out. He also wanted to keep a closer eye on her. Thanksgiving of that year, she goes to visit a friend who's living and teaching in DC, and apparently on Thanksgiving Day, Dorothy receives a package which came from the U.S. Postal Service, which her friend noted as weird because the U.S. Postal Service doesn't normally deliver packages on holidays, but Dorothy doesn't tell her what's in the package. She just leaves and goes home 3 days early. Whether that package was related to her disappearance or not, nobody really knows, but it was just something a little bit out of the ordinary. In New York, things are normal. On December 10th, she hosts a luncheon for some of her friends. On December 12th, she tells her mother she's going to go out shopping to find a dress for her sister's coming out party, which was supposed to take place on December 17th. Mom says, I'll come with you. She says, no, I'll just call you if I find anything I like. And she leaves on foot. She's dressed normal, which back then was high class. She's got like a fox muff with white points. She has $20 to $30 cash on her, which is the equivalent of like a little over $1,000 today. Walks to Fifth Avenue, turns south, and walks about 20 blocks to Park in Tilford's, where she buys a half pound of chocolate and she charges it to the family's account. She walks about 30 blocks to Brentano's Books, and there she buys a light collection of funny stories, and she also charges that collection to her family's account. Upon leaving the store, she runs into one of her friends, Gladys King. The two talk for a little bit, especially about the upcoming party, and Dorothy tells her she's going to be walking home now and cutting through Central Park. This is the last time anyone sees Dorothy Arnold, and apparently when she didn't return home for dinner, her parents were like surprised but not really concerned. But by nighttime, when she still wasn't home, they started to worry. But they were really concerned about keeping the situation under wraps, and so they started making discreet calls to their family and friends asking if anyone had seen Dorothy. But they were asking all their friends like not to tell anyone that she was missing. Apparently they were so concerned with people not finding out that she was missing that when one of Dorothy's friends called back around midnight asking if she had returned home, her mom was like, yeah, she's here. The next morning, there was obviously still no word from Dorothy, and her dad really wanted to avoid any bad publicity because he was worried that she had run off and it would result in bad PR from like a societal and business standpoint. So he calls the family attorney. The attorney's name is John Keith, and John Keith comes over and he looks through Dorothy's room and he finds burned papers in the grate, but he can't really make out what the papers were. He finds letters with foreign stamps, and he finds some brochures for transatlantic steam lines. All of her clothes, all of her possessions, all her money was still in her room. So after a couple weeks, they still haven't found her. Then he's like, okay, we should bring in a detective agency. Checking police departments, morgues, steamship records, marriage records in case she had snuck off and married George, but to no avail. George was actually in Italy with his family, and they called George, and he was responding to the parents, and he was like, I have no idea where she is, but they didn't believe him. They thought that Dorothy was with John. So secretly in January, they booked a trip to Italy to go surprise him and find Dorothy, but they get there, she's not there. George is obviously surprised to see them. He's like, I told you I have no idea where she is, but I do intend to marry her when she comes back. Her parents are like, okay, George, if you really don't know where she is, then give us your letters. And he's like, okay, so he does. And there was one thing in one of the letters that stood out to them. Dorothy had apparently written to him, basically telling him about another publication that had rejected her writing. He wrote, all I can see is a long road ahead with no turning. Mother will always think an accident has happened. Apparently, the rest of the letter was reported to have been cheerful, feminine, and chatty. After Francis, her dad, gets back to New York after meeting with George in Italy, he's like, okay, it's been 6 weeks since she's disappeared. It's time to go to the police. And he holds a press conference where he states that he believes that Dorothy has been kidnapped, is probably no longer alive, and he believed that her body had been thrown into the reservoir, but he did offer a $1,000 reward. Apparently in the press conference, he was asked about Dorothy's male suitors, and he said, I would have welcomed any suitors who were employed, basically making a direct jab at George. But he basically wanted the Central Park reservoir drained, but it was frozen over. These were like, no can do, but eventually all of the ponds were searched and there was no sign of Dorothy. George, her boyfriend, gets back to New York in February, and he's basically attacked by press, and he's saying, I believe she's going to come back, and when she does, I intend to marry her once we can get permission from her family. But the family's like, that's a lie. We're never going to approve of it. We don't know why he thinks she's still alive. But as time goes on, George starts being concerned with Dorothy's whereabouts as well, and he starts taking out full-page ads in every paper imaginable, pleading for her to please come home. After this case goes public, the family is getting all kinds of tips. She's in Europe, she's in Norfolk, she's in Honolulu, she's in Philadelphia, and she'll soon be on a train to come back to New York. Her family even receives a letter addressed to them, signed by supposedly Dorothy, that appeared to be her handwriting, but they later determined that that was a fake. There were just a lot of people out there trying to get this reward money. After Dorothy's been missing for 75 days, the deputy police commissioner comes out and says, we don't have any evidence that any crime has been committed. This is being treated as a missing persons case, and we really don't have a single clue as to what happened to her. 1, 2, 3 years pass, the family learns nothing new, and eventually they stop wearing mourning clothes. But in April of 1914, this story breaks in Pittsburgh about a mystery house. It was the site of a maternity hospital for unwed mothers, but apparently there were 2 large furnaces underneath the house that the doctors were using to get rid of the mothers who didn't make it, who didn't survive their operations, if you catch my drift. One of the nurses had apparently called in a tip to the lawyer, and she was like, I saw Dorothy here. And that's what happened to her. But apparently these claims were never substantiated. That's one of the theories, but it's also thought that maybe the nurse just said that she saw Dorothy there in order to tip off authorities as to what was really going on at this mystery house, because she knew it would prompt an investigation. The second tip or theory came in 1916 when this man who was in prison for extortion, his name was Edward Glenn Norris, he went to the warden and he was like, I helped bury a body. A wealthy young man paid me $250 to go to this mansion near West Point, and we saw this unconscious young woman, and then we dug a grave, and that was Dorothy. He was told that the woman had died after an operation had gone wrong, but the police dug up the basement of the house that matched the description, and they didn't find anything. The family was also really mad at any of these claims because they were like, Dorothy was too much of a lady. She would not have put herself in that position. Her father continued to hold the belief that she had been kidnapped and was no longer alive, while her mother thought that she was suffering from amnesia and would come home someday. The third theory is that depressed because she couldn't be with the love of her life and depressed because she kept getting rejected as a writer, she bought a ticket to one of the transatlantic steamships and took the chocolate, read the book, and then in the middle of the night jumped off the side, assuming that her body would turn up, and hence her mom thinking that it was an accident. The thing was, they never found a body. Other possible theories include that she left to start a new life. She did have about $30 in cash on her when she disappeared. And remember, she did charge those two purchases to her family's account. She also had the clothes and jewelry on her back, which was worth a substantial amount of money. Perhaps she was pregnant from her affair with George in September and went off to have the baby somewhere else. Maybe she was met with foul play on her walk home through Central Park, but her family had enough money to buy her ransom. Kidnapper, if there was one, would have made out way more with the ransom than by selling her to someone who wanted to use her for illicit activities. Also very interesting to note, the detective who worked on the case before his death destroyed any documents, anything he had on the case. Nobody knows why. Also, the relative who inherited her letters also destroyed the evidence. That's their prerogative as her family member, but nobody knows why. So what do you think happened? Did she go by her own hand? Did she run away? Kidnappers, or was it something else? Over 100 years, and at this point it's very likely that Dorothy Arnold's disappearance will never be solved. This is why it's called New York's coldest case, and I'm curious to hear what you think happened.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
In the span of just 3 years, 2 members of the Carmen family passed away under suspicious circumstances. Years later, 22-year-old Nathan Carmen was looked into after authorities started to think that his stories just were not making sense. It also stood out that should those family members pass away, Nathan would inherit millions. So did Nathan get rid of his grandfather and mother for money, or did he just get caught up in a series of tragic circumstances? Nathan Carmen was born on January 21st of 1994 to his parents, Linda and Clark. And when he was a little boy, there were certain things about Nathan's behavior that stood out to the people around him. For example, the fact that he had difficulty with social interactions and pattern-based behaviors. And that made a little more sense when at 5 years old, Nathan was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. If you guys didn't know, Asperger's syndrome is considered to be a part of the autism spectrum. When he was only 10 years old, his parents got a divorce, and the remainder of Nathan's childhood continued to feel like he was facing challenge after challenge. At school, specifically in high school, Nathan experienced a lot of bullying and he had trouble making friends. Where he did find comfort though was within his horse, a horse that he had that he named Cruz. Cruz was everything to Nathan. They had a very close, deep bond, but when Nathan was around 16 years old, his horse Cruz passed away. And losing Cruz triggered what Nathan's mother referred to him as having a quote psychotic episode while he was at school. And I feel like that was quite the significant event in Nathan's life because it felt like afterwards he retrieved even further. Not wanting to talk to anyone, not wanting to see anyone, he actually ended up running away from home. He eventually did come back, but point being, he ran away. Following that, he moved out of his mom's house and into a camper parked outside. So he wasn't technically living with his mom anymore. They were not underneath the same roof, but he was still on his mom's property. And the relationship that Nathan had with his mother, Linda, I would say was intense and complicated. She was protective of him. She saw help for him, and in her eyes, she was just being a caring mother, but in his eyes, she was overprotective and smothering. After his parents got divorced, Nathan's father ended up moving away, so he wasn't really in the picture, so it was pretty much just him and his mom, kind of, because another person that was really present in Nathan's life when he was growing up was his grandfather. When Nathan was born, he was the first grandson of millionaire real estate developer John Chocolos, and the relationship that Nathan had with his grandfather was a pretty close one. They saw each other pretty regularly. John played a pretty active role in Nathan's life, and even more so when his father pretty much left the picture. And because John had a lot of money, he doted over Nathan. He paid for his schooling, his housing, giving him everything that he could have ever wanted and needed. He was also the one to buy Nathan that camper in which he lived in outside of his mother's house. He also eventually eventually paid for an apartment for him. His grandfather was kind of the buffer, the peacemaker in between the rocky relationship that Nathan had with his mom, but those two people in Nathan's life, his grandfather and his mother, would be the very two people who would pass away under suspicious circumstances. On December 20th of 2013, 87-year-old John Chakalas was found deceased in his own home. It appeared that someone had entered John's bedroom while he slept and 3 times at close range, deliberately and intentionally. When the investigation into his very tragic death began, one thing was clear, and that was that whoever did this on purpose. Immediately, police suspected Nathan, and for a few reasons. First one being that Nathan was the last person to see John alive. He was with him that night, but eventually ended up leaving and went back to his house. But even bigger than that was the fact that the weapon used on John matched the exact kind of weapon that Nathan had just recently bought. There was also no sign of forced entry, leading investigators to believe that whoever entered John's bedroom that night had access to the house. And I'm not 100% sure how true this is, but some reports also state that Nathan's internet search history leading up to the tragedy was also very concerning, including phrases such as how to commit murder and searches about inheritance law. And that's important to know when you learn that Nathan stood to inherit a lot of money from his grandfather's estate, some reports listing it to be over $500,000. He wasn't the only one getting money by any means, because his grandfather had left well over $40 million. That would be split between all the family members, but still important to note. However, all of that, even though it was more than enough to raise some eyebrows, all of it was circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors did not have enough to charge Nathan with anything. The weapon was never found. There was really no physical evidence linking Nathan directly to the crime scene. No witnesses, no confession, nothing really. So Nathan inherited the money, the case went cold, and that was that. Now we get to September 17th of 2016, 3 years after losing his grandfather. Nathan Carmen was now 25 years old, and he now owned a boat. A 31-foot boat that he named the Chicken Pox. It was actually a boat that he had purchased with the money that his grandfather had left behind. That day in September, Nathan wanted to go fishing, and he wanted his mother Linda to go with him. Linda wasn't particularly excited about the idea. She really wasn't into fishing, but Nathan insisted on getting her to come. Come to find out, Linda's 3 sisters, so Nathan's aunts, had warned Linda not to go on the boat because they did not trust Nathan. All 3 of them actually believed that Nathan was the person responsible for John's passing, but despite their concerns, Linda agreed, and off she went to go fishing with her son Nathan. On September 17th, they left from a Rhode Island marina. Their plan was to go deep sea fishing, and their plan was to stay out in the sea overnight. And we don't learn this until later on, but it turns out that before the trip, Nathan had made some adjustments to the boat. He had removed 2 trim tabs, which from my understanding, they were stabilizing devices that help keep the boat level and steady. When he was questioned about this later, he couldn't really give an explanation as to why he decided to do that. Nathan had also recently purchased flotation suits, specialized survival gear designed to keep a person alive in cold ocean water should anything happen. Nathan bought 2 suits, but on the day of the fishing trip, he only took one of them with him. He later claims that he quote-unquote forgot to bring his mother's suit. They headed out to sea, and then according to Nathan, disaster struck. 8 days after Linda and Nathan headed off for their fishing trip, a man spotted something in the water, a small inflatable life raft drifting alone in the ocean. On that raft was Nathan Carmen, very much alive even after 8 days of allegedly being out on sea. However, he was alone. His mother Linda was nowhere to be found. Nathan's story was simple. The boat had started taking on water in the middle of the night. It happened very fast. Nathan managed to get the life raft, and he called out for his mother, but in the darkness and in the chaos, he could not find her. The boat sank. Linda Carmen disappeared into the ocean, and to this day, her body has never been found. Now, to backtrack a little bit, when authorities first called one of Linda's sisters, Nathan's aunts, to inform her that Nathan and Linda were missing, it took all of 1 second for her to say that she was suspicious of Nathan. She did not hold back to authorities, basically saying, look, I'm not surprised that they're missing, and I guarantee you that Nathan is going to come back, but he's going to come back alone, and my sister will not. Even sharing with authorities that back when John was murdered, Nathan Carmen was the prime suspect, and telling them that that exact week, the week that they went off for their fishing trip, was the week that John's estate was settled, and not only was Nathan set to inherit a lot of money, but his mom Linda was also set to inherit millions. She was making it more than clear that she did not trust Nathan, and that was kind of the first thing that led investigators to pay very, very close attention to Nathan's behavior after he was eventually found. As investigators examined and ran through Nathan's story, red flags seemed to be appearing everywhere. For example, the life raft that Nathan escaped in was surprisingly well stocked, almost as if he had prepared for an external survival situation out in the sea. For someone that claimed that the sinking of the boat happened suddenly and unexpectedly, Nathan was remarkably prepared. The things that he had changed about the boat prior to leaving also bothered investigators, leaving them to wonder why he would be removing the trim tabs. Naval experts confirming that that would only make the boat less stable and more likely to sink. The quote-unquote forgotten wrong flotation suit was also quite alarming, Nathan having bought 2 suits but only taking one out onto the boat, knowing that they were going far offshore into the cold water and staying there overnight. And then there was the money, because if Linda Carmen passed away, Nathan was set to inherit $7 million, money that Linda herself would have inherited that same week from her father, John Chocolos. And like I said, Linda's sisters did not hesitate. They believed that Nathan had gotten rid of their sister just like they believed that he had gotten rid of their father. It did not take long after Nathan was found for the sisters to hire lawyers and begin fighting to prevent Nathan from inheriting anything else at all. Later, however, come to find out that Linda had not left anything to Nathan whatsoever. She had cut him out of his will, specifically leaving a note stating, quote, "I have intentionally omitted Nathan and all of his descendants as beneficiaries under my will," end quote. Also, everything that I told you before about John's murder was coming back up in conversations, and Nathan Carmen was not looking good, to say the least. For years following Linda's disappearance, so between 2019 to 2023, Nathan was being looked at as a suspect as the investigation continued. After his mother disappeared and the boat along with her, Nathan filed an insurance claim and collected $85,000 for the boat. But it was kind of starting to feel like the criminal case connecting him to John's murder and Liz's disappearance had hit a wall, but Linda's sisters were not giving up, and in 2019, they won a significant victory in probate court. A judge ruled that because of the many questions in the case, Nathan could not and would not inherit from his mother's estate. It wasn't a criminal conviction by any means, but it was the first time that official legal authority had declared that Nathan could have had something to do with Linda's disappearance. And then fast forward to May of 2022, nearly 6 years after Linda vanished, federal prosecutors charged Nathan Carmen with first-degree murder of Linda Carmen and multiple counts of fraud for collecting insurance money. Nathan pleaded not guilty. His defense attorneys arguing that he had Asperger's syndrome, which made him socially awkward and unusual, but not a murderer. They insisted that the boat sinking was a genuine accident, claiming that the adjustments that Nathan had made on the boat were amateur attempts at boat improvement, not an intention or a plan to get rid of his mother. The trial was set, and finally, after nearly a decade, in some people's opinion, because believe it or not, this case is controversial, but finally, it seemed like Nathan Carmen would finally be facing justice. But then on June 15th of 2023, guards at the Cheshire Correctional Institution in Connecticut found 29-year-old Nathan Carmen unresponsive in his cell. He was gone, deceased before the trial could even begin. For Linda's sisters, there would be no closure, there would be no trial, no verdict, no conviction. Like I said, Linda Carmen's body has never been found, the weapon used to murder John has never been recovered, and the $7 million estate to this day, from what I gathered from my research, remains in legal proceedings. Like what? I was actually about to tell you my opinion on this case, but I kind of want to see where you guys stand on it before I tell you. Anyway, that is all I have for today. Let me know your thoughts on this. I actually really want to know what you guys think happened, what is true, what is not. But yeah, thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. Also, you guys, so many comments about my videos being blurry. I don't know if something's wrong with my Wi-Fi. I don't know, but I do know that immediately after I post, for the first like 20 minutes or so, because my videos are so long, they're usually blurry at the start, but I think later they get better. I don't know. Let me know though. If you're watching this, like if this video has been up more than 30 minutes and it's still blurry, please let me know. But also it's gonna stress me out. Okay, love you, bye.
Every single state in the US has had at least one serial killer, if not multiple, and today I'm going to tell you guys about the worst serial killer from Wyoming. If you're new here, this is a map of all the states I've covered so far, and today we're talking about the first serial killer ever to be known in this state. And actually, it was before the state even technically became a state. Today I'm going to tell you guys about Polly Bartlett, and she's often called the murderess of Slaughterhouse Gulch or the Black Widow of Innkeepers. So Polly Bartlett, along with her family, ran a lodge in Wyoming, and oftentimes travelers and businessmen would stay here and Polly would help with the lodge. And this is in the time of like the height of the gold rushes in America, and so a lot of times people would come through and they were talking about the gold rushes, or they were involved in mining or something like that in some way. And so that was like a very big part of the traveling that was happening in this area. Oftentimes Polly was the one kind of dealing with like hospitality in the lodge, so she would bring them food, she would clean their room, she would help them check in and out and take care of anything that they needed. At the same time, Polly and her dad, who sometimes he's called Jim and in some sources he's called Steven, so I don't know what his actual name was, but I'm gonna call him Jim for this. Polly and Jim also had like a long history of crime, and at the same time that they're running this lodge, They're also running a saloon in Ohio where Polly would strategically try to get men alone, and once they were alone, Jim would come in, he would attack them, they would rob them, and then they would murder them. And Polly's first victim actually was a man named Lewis Nichols. He ended up taking $4,000, which is a huge amount of money for that time. And then they realized that they could have a system going here. Polly lures the men, Jim kills them, and they both get a cut in the money. And so they start doing this all the time, preying on traveling men coming through the town for gold rushes. And after months of doing this, they end up killing a man named Theodore Fountain, who was the son of a wealthy mine owner in the area. And so the dad of this guy ends up hiring investigators to try to find his son. Investigators, as well as some other people, kind of look into this, and they start to notice a pattern. A lot of men are going missing soon after they go to Jim and Polly's family lodge. And so they try to start looking into them and seeing if they can connect these people to Jim and Polly. And they start to realize multiple people were seen with Polly right before they disappeared or were killed. And so they start to have this theory that that's probably what happened to Theodore Fountain as well, that they killed him for money. So when Jim and Polly realize that people are hot on their trails, they're gonna get caught, they flee, and the police end up coming to the family lodge to look for them. And this is when they search the property and they find something absolutely shocking that they were not expecting. They find dozens of remains under the lodge and all around the property, and we now know that oftentimes when men would come and stay at the lodge, Polly would bring them their food, like I was saying earlier, she would help them out, but all of their food and drinks were laced with arsenic to poison them. Oftentimes, what she would do is she would go out on the town, meet men, find out who had money, who was being successful from the gold rushes, who was a successful miner, who was going to bring in the most money for them. She would offer for them to stay at the lodge, she would talk about the lodge, they would come stay, she would poison them, they would take their money, and then Jim would bury them on the property. So it's literally a father and daughter killing duo. So they are now on the run for about 2 months at this point, and a price is set for anyone who can turn them in or get any information on them. And a guy named Ed Ford, whose brother actually ended up being one of their victims, they killed his brother. He decides he's going to track them down, and eventually he does. He finds them, and he shoots Jim, and then he turns Polly into the police. And Polly is now in jail, but someone else came and shot Polly through the window of her jail cell. And it is estimated that this father and daughter killing duo, that's so terrifying to say, killed at least 22 people. Probably both were serial killers. It sounds like most of them died by Polly poisoning them, but the dad killed them too. And then he also hid their bodies. And so they both were serial killers, two of the first serial killers in Wyoming, and that's absolutely scary.
Now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it. So the other day, a Reddit user posted this photo to Reddit. It's of his apartment at night. He had been complaining of hearing rustling noises in his apartment over the last couple nights. Many users thought they could kind of see something in this area of his kitchen, but I couldn't, so I looked at the brightened version. This is the photo brightened. And I know what you're gonna say, yes, it does look like Keanu Reeves, but look at how tall he is compared to the fridge. But it gets so much worse. This is a video he took of his apartment at night where you can see something happen to the light in the kitchen. But let's look at the brightened version. Yes, it's terrifying, but is it a ghost?
This person's energy is established in this space. It's established. So it's like, it feels like a roommate, or, it could be the person that created this video. Although I'm not getting really strong fake vibes, fake or manipulated energy from this, like I normally would from a video that's faked. But this is the energy of someone who lives there. It doesn't feel like though who owns that space. It feels like it would be like if this video wasn't in question, if someone, if you're just looking at pictures, it would feel like a roommate or a friend who's there all the time, or maybe the brother of somebody. It feels they're connected somehow to the space, even if that connection is that, I don't know, is there an attic they've been living in? Or do you know what I'm saying? Or this is someone who comes in off the street and knows there's a certain door open or a way to open a door and gets in. But this is not paranormal, which to me is creepier.
This 15-year-old girl is called one of Britain's most deadliest kids
after she brutally murdered a teen mom for absolutely no reason. Samantha Magin was born in England and she was raised in Wales End, right outside of Newcastle. Samantha came from a very close family. She had a very happy childhood. She was a very popular, sweet girl. She was obviously very beautiful. In high school, Samantha dreamed of being a model, but her entire life changed when she was freshly 18 years old and found out that she was pregnant. The baby's father did not want to be involved, so Samantha was going to be a single teen mom. At first, as you can imagine, Samantha was extremely nervous, but she eventually got really excited about the idea of having a little baby and being a mom. Her friends and family were very supportive, but Samantha's own mother had a very terrible feeling. She had a premonition that something terrible was going to happen to her daughter Samantha. She actually thought that maybe her daughter would die during childbirth. But in May of 2007, Samantha gave birth to her son, a little baby boy named Callum. He was very healthy, mom was very healthy, and Samantha was just over the moon. She was so in love with her little baby boy Callum. She was so excited. But still, her own mother couldn't shake this terrible feeling that something was going to happen to her daughter. About 3 months later, on August 2nd, 2007, Samantha's son is about 10 weeks old, and her family convinces her that Samantha deserves a night out with her friends without her baby. Samantha was extremely nervous about leaving her son, but she was also excited about the idea of going out with her friends and feeling like a normal teenage girl again. Samantha and her friends spend the entire day at the beach. They're having a lot of fun, but then Samantha wants to go home and check on her baby. When Samantha walks through the door, her younger sister is holding her baby. Her sister's only 16 years old. Her baby, Callum, is crying. Samantha feels terrible, and she tells her friends and her sister that she's just going to stay home for the rest of the night, but it was her sister that actually encouraged Samantha that she would be fine with the baby and told Samantha to go out and enjoy the rest of her night with her friends. That would be the last time that anyone in Samantha's family would ever see her alive. Samantha and her friends enjoy the rest of their evening. Around 11:30 p.m., they're all walking home when they pass a group of about 4 guys, and apparently one of Samantha's friends makes a comment about one of these guys, and this really offended this group of guys. That group of older guys were actually staying at an apartment that was on that street, so they all go inside, and then 2 of them come back out and start attacking Samantha and her friends. Samantha was trying to break up this fight when a third person came out of nowhere and stabbed 18-year-old Samantha Magin to death. They stabbed her 43 times. All 3 of these people run away. Samantha's friends run to go try and get help, but sadly, there was nothing that could be done for Samantha. And investigators were extremely confused about this extremely brutal murder. 43 stab wounds is overkill, and typically when you see overkill like this in a crime, it's typically a crime of passion. There's hatred or anger towards the victim, but this seemed random. Brutal and vicious, but random. So the police speak to the public and they ask if anyone has any tips, any information, please come forward, and they get a tip that cracked this case wide open. The night that Samantha was killed, a man reported that 2 of his girlfriend's friends showed up at their house, and these 2 men were absolutely covered in blood. These 2 guys were the guys that initially attacked Samantha and her group of friends. They were arrested, but they were still looking for the third person, the person that actually killed Samantha. But the very next day, the person that killed Samantha Magin turned themselves into the police, and this shocked absolutely everyone. The person that brutally killed this beautiful 18-year-old mother was a baby-faced 15-year-old girl. 15-year-old Jordan Jobson had a seemingly typical normal childhood until her early teen years. She got involved with the wrong crowd. She started dating older guys, and she got involved in substances and alcohol. By the time that Jordan was 15, she was addicted to the white powder. She was actually recently expelled from high school for missing too many classes and also being caught skiing at school. At 15 years old, Jordan had a much older boyfriend, this guy named Terrence Davidson. Terrence was at least 18 years old, but probably even older. I couldn't get an exact age, but he was definitely a legal adult, and Jordan was only 15 years old at the time.
And it was Terrence and all of his older friends that were feeding and supplying this 15-year-old girl with substances and alcohol. The night of Samantha's murder, 15-year-old Jordan, her boyfriend's friends were drinking. They were using large amounts of substances. They were skiing. Jordan said to the police when she turned herself in that she killed Samantha, but she didn't murder Samantha, and that she barely remembers anything of the night because she was so drunk and high. Jordan's boyfriend and one of his friends were the two guys that actually went out and confronted Samantha and her friends. Jordan said that she felt like she had to defend her boyfriend, so she went into the kitchen of the apartment. She grabbed a kitchen knife. She went outside and she said she was so out of her mind, and then she killed 18-year-old Samantha. Jordan wanted a plea deal. She was willing to plead guilty to manslaughter, but the prosecution denied this and they charged her with murder. At her trial, she was emotionless. She showed absolutely no remorse. She was found guilty and she was sentenced at 15 years old to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. But after 2 appeals, that was reduced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 11 years. Jordan first became eligible for parole in 2018, but she ruined her chance after threatening another inmate. In 2019, the prison began granting Jordan unsupervised day release. So they would just open up the prison doors and just let her go walk around and hoped that she would come back. But she did quickly violate the conditions of that day release, and that was right around the time where she was going to be eligible for parole again, so she was not paroled at that time. And then in December of 2020, Jordan was released on parole to the disgust of Samantha's loved ones. But only 6 months later, Jordan was back in jail. But according to an article that was posted in September of 2025, so not that long ago, just a few months ago, Jordan has been released from prison and is currently out of jail. She has never showed remorse for killing 18-year-old Samantha Magin. This is such a tragic, senseless, heartbreaking case. Samantha was so young. She was a brand new mom. Her baby Callum was only 10 weeks old when he lost his mother. Today, Samantha's son, Callum, would be 18 years old. He would be the exact same age that his mother was when her life was stolen from her and when she was stolen from him. And I wish him absolutely all the best and all the love in the entire world. If you watched to the end of this video, thank you so much for listening to Samantha Magin's story. Leave me pink emojis in the comments so I know that you made it to the end of Samantha Magin's story. I'm extremely interested to hear all your thoughts and opinions on this case. There are a lot of people that do think that Jordan deserved a second chance, that she was only 15 years old. She was using all these substances that all these adult men were giving her. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments. But while you're in the comments, please, please, please always remember to be respectful. This is Samantha's story, and people that knew and loved Samantha in real life could be in the comment section. You have no idea. So please always remember to be respectful. And while you're in the comment section, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to everyone that suggested that we cover this case today. This is not a very well-known case, so I'm really happy that I have the opportunity to tell Samantha's story and talk about Samantha, who seemed like a truly great person. And I will see you guys all next time in my next video. Please be a good person to your fellow person.
Imagine glancing at your neighbour's porch and slowly realising the person lying there hasn't moved. It was late summer 2024 in Billings Heights. The area is generally very chill, quiet and residential, not somewhere that you would expect to find a gruesome murder scene. Jenna Rayla Cohn was 52 and living in the area. She was an amazing woman, extremely selfless. She was always putting others before herself, especially her sons Nathan and Joseph. Now, she saw them as her little babies, even when they grew up to be taller than her. She loved doing arts and crafts and general kind of chill activities, and she was a huge fan of the Dallas Cowboys thanks to her brother. She'd actually been living with a guy called Shane Roberts. The pair had met on a dating site about 2 years prior and had eventually moved in together. But weirdly, that particular month, her neighbours stopped seeing her around. They were like, this is so weird. She's usually very friendly. She comes out, she waves, she says hi. So why haven't we seen her in so long? Like, where is she? She wasn't the kind of person to just lock herself away. And as the days and days went on, the neighbours were just getting more and more concerned. Then people next door started to be like, there's actually a strange smell coming from the property. And the way Shane, the boyfriend, had been acting was really sketchy. Couldn't really put their finger on it, but he was just acting a bit suspicious. And there was a pile of blankets on the porch,
almost shaped like a body. So they decided to ring police. They were like, do you know what? We really hope we've got the wrong end of the stick here. We hope the police will just come round, tell us what's going on, and put our minds at rest. But when officers peeled back the blankets on the porch, they found Jenna. She'd been almost decapitated and left to rot on the porch. Absolutely barbaric, inhumane, and sickening. I have no other words. And police obviously needed to find out who was responsible. It was incredibly dangerous for these officers to try and go inside the home. They knew there could very well be a cold-blooded killer inside the property. So they drew their weapons, they secured the scene, and they stepped inside. They went from room to room, systematically looking around for the culprit. And the apartment seemed empty until they heard a dog barking. They followed the noise and realized the noise was coming from inside of a wardrobe. Inside, they found Shane cowering with a little dog. They immediately arrested him. They knew it was pretty likely that he was to blame here. And they found a rubbish bag inside the property with a bloody hatchet and a knife. And get this, Shane tried to defend himself to officers by saying Jenna knew how to push his buttons and had pushed him too far. The judge called it one of the most gruesome and violent murders she had ever seen. After he pleaded guilty, he was given 85 years in prison.